Hi everyone. This is the start of our new unit. I have to say that at the beginning of the semester, I was most excited about this unit on the Normans. And you guys remember how I completely nerded out when Tyler said, well, wait, looking at this map, why do we see a Norman kingdom here in Normandy in northern France and England, but also in southern Italy and Sicily? And this is a fascinating story and allows us to explore in depth some key concepts of Romanesque Europe. And I know that things are not as we all had hoped, but we're going to make the best of it. Um, I want to say a few things about Unit 3, and this is something to take notes on because I have really found our wrap-up discussions about key ideas from each unit really helpful. And we're not going to really do that here, but I wanted to start with a few key notions from Unit 3. I think one of them that we're going to kind of continue talking about is the importance of relics, reliquaries, and pilgrimage, as well as the continued importance of those connections with Byzantium. We're going to see that when we talk about the Normans and the Crusades. And we've also now seen the development of monumental sculpture and architecture outside of the Mediterranean, and that is going to continue as well as we discuss Romanesque design and Romanesque style. Another key idea for us to take from Unit 3 too is this notion of what the foundational scholar Erwin Panofsky, a huge leader in modern art history in the mid-20th century, he talked about renaissances instead of one huge renaissance. And this would be a lowercase r renaissance instead of a capital renaissance. And many renaissances, these little periods of classical revival, interest in kind of reawakening the culture of the Roman Empire. We've seen this in the Carolingian period. We've seen this under the Ettonians. I think this really drives home to us this idea that classicism never goes away in the Middle Ages. Thinking about this as a kind of dark age between classical antiquity and the capital R Renaissance that emerges in Italy is simply inaccurate. All right, here's our overview of Unit 4. We're going to spend 3 weeks on this unit. And we're starting here, this week is really going to be our kind of transition between weeks 3 and 4. And I've really redone this here in light of our current situation. And so our first week, we're going to focus on pilgrimage, the monumental sculpture and architecture around pilgrimage. So building on themes from last week. And then we're also going to talk about the Crusades. Next week, we're going to look at the Normans in France and Britain, talk about the Norman conquest of England in 1066, and then we're not going to look at the Normas in the Mediterranean. I'm not going to go back and fix that right now, but we're going to look at the Normans in the Mediterranean, so southern Italy and Sicily, which is just a fascinating case study for us. But let's review these pilgrimage routes here. And on our map of Romanesque Europe, we see all of the different routes, all of these different threads that feed into the Camino de Santiago, the route to Santiago de Compostela in the kind of top northwestern corner of Spain. These were the most important pilgrimage routes of medieval Europe, and it led to a revolution in architecture. And we can see that best in the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela, the end destination here, the high point of this arduous journey. And remember that the relics of the Apostle St. James were held in the cathedral here. They were discovered in the 9th century in Galicia in Spain, and by the 11th century, the pilgrimage route to Compostela to see James's relics rivaled the pilgrimage routes to Rome and Jerusalem. Now, there were a series of churches that stood on this site since the 9th century, and we are not going to look at the exterior that was heavily modified in later eras, but the present cathedral, the actual kind of bones here, were begun in the late 11th century and finished in the early 12th century. Many characteristics here are hallmarks of all Romanesque pilgrimage churches, like the ones at Toulouse and Conques that we're going to look at later. And I think there's a few key questions that can inform our understanding of these buildings. First of all, especially when we look at the plan here, we can ask ourselves, what is the fundamental function of a pilgrimage church? One of them is to house relics, and the outgrowth of that then is to permit a large number of people to see relics. Pilgrimage churches, though, are also holding Mass. They might have a monastic community connected to it. There might be a parish community. And so the second question then is, what architectural forms allow for all of these functions to occur? And again, let's draw our attention back to the plan here. We see multiple aisles in the nave. Those aisles are extended here into the transept to allow different sorts of spaces to keep different people separate. We also see side chapels here in both transit arms, and we also have these mini side chapels here off of the ambulatory of the East Choir. So we can imagine a pilgrim entering the church here from this west end. Over on the cross section here, we're on the far left. And just as a side, this is what the original Romanesque front of Santiago would have looked like. Very different today. So you're entering through the west as a pilgrim. You are tired and dirty and exhausted and hungry. Remember from our Pilgrim's Guide to Santiago that you've gone through dangerous places with people who speak all sorts of different languages and have very different beliefs and customs. It's been a strange, long journey. You get to the church and you enter and move from west to east, perhaps visiting some reliquaries in these side chapels, before then ending at the high point here to see the relics of St. James. Let's look at the interior, and we see Romanesque design, these large, heavy, bulky, round arches, composite piers made out of the square piers and the colonnettes. We move up to this gallery space, and then up again to this huge, massive barrel vault that supports the roof. We see the same sort of Romanesque pilgrimage architecture here in the Church of San Sonnen in Toulouse, which is also on the pilgrimage route to Santiago. It was an important stop, and the church here, look, the dates are exactly contemporary with Santiago. The relics here are to the first bishop of Toulouse, who is San Sarnan, or also referred to as Saint Saturnin. And this is a Cluniac church, like the Mother Church of Cluny. And you guys read about how Cluny was trying to kind of position itself, think of itself as a business. How could they capitalize on all of these pilgrims moving to, kind of walking to Santiago? But this Cluniac church was already a main stopping point. The exterior has that kind of typical Romanesque building block approach. All of these kind of big geometric pieces that are attached together. It has that kind of sense of being piecemeal. It's not this cohesive, unified design that we think of with the later Gothic churches. In the interior here, we also see that early stone vaulting, that big, massive barrel vaults. These are ribs to help support that vault. And then they also, of course, give us that kind of vertical emphasis, kind of leading our eye from those colonnettes, those engaged colonnettes, from the main floor to the gallery, and then up to that big barrel vault. All right, This is the third pilgrimage church that we're going to look at, again from the same time period with the same features. The Abbey Church of Sainte Foy was on the way to 3 different pilgrimage meccas. You might have stopped at Sainte Foy on your way to Santiago de Compostela. You also might have stopped at Sainte Foy on your way to Rome or Jerusalem. And it's built to honor the 4th century martyr, Saint Faith, or Sainte Foy. We're going to see her reliquary in the next lecture. And here again, we see this kind of heavy masonry, these big, massive piers with arches that are tall, but not very wide. All of this stonework is so heavy, and and we don't quite have the sophisticated Gothic vaults that allow for that huge, that kind of lightness, that kind of airiness in the interior. This is a great view above of a typical Romanesque westwork. So we see the twin towers here, and look at the opportunity for monumental sculpture. For example, the tympanum panel. This is the half-rounded panel above a doorway, and we're going to see examples of Romanesque pilgrimage-focused tympana in the next lecture as well. All right, so we're going to end it there and then transition here to sculpture in the next lecture.